much for joining us today. We're really excited to bring you back to this site. I know this is our 4th field trip to this site, but it's a big site. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about. And we're about to start the next phase of ecosystem spinning, so we're really excited to bring you out here, let you know what we're doing. We're going to be taking a trip together over in that direction. Last time we met, we went up that hill, and we'll talk about the pilot project as well, but we'll be spending most of our time over there. Let us know if you need us to go a little slower, if you've got some questions, if you've got some concerns, just talk to myself. I'm Ann Krelock, Planning and Program Manager of Marin Wildfire, and I'm joined by a whole bunch of other folks who are very involved in this project. So let's, before we get started today, let's first acknowledge that it's 9/11, and I'm going to ask SRSAFRZ to say a word or two, and then let's do a round of introductions, and then we're going to introduce Bill Cole and also Kate Anderson with SRSAFRZ. Ben, is there anything you want to say about 9/11?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. Quinn Gardner, Deputy Director of Emergency Management with Rafael. And I just want to, I think it's one of those days that we just have to continue to acknowledge as part of our history, as part of not just how the fire service got where it is, but how emergency management, how homeland security, how law enforcement, et cetera. And I know there's a lot of people in some form of service, whether that's teaching or fire or law or anything in there, that were inspired by heroes of 9/11. And obviously that changed the way we look at the world and the world interacts with us. So I just want to take a minute, if we can, just to recognize all the lives lost that day and since in various related incidents. So just join me for a moment. Thank you, everybody, and we'll have a great tour today and learn about one other way we try to make our world a little bit safer. So thank you. I think, Kate, you're going to take it.
Yeah, let's do a quick round of introductions, just name and affiliation if you have one, and then we'll get started today. I'll just say a couple words about the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, invite Mark to fill in any gaps, and then we'll introduce Bill and Kate as well. I'm also going to hand or pass around this sign-in sheet and a pen. If you haven't signed in already, please do. We want to make sure you get information about future events. Also, there's a QR code. If you're all fancy pants and have a phone where you can scan the QR code, you can get a direct link to our frequently asked questions page with a map on it that shows phase 2 of the work area. If you're not fancy pants or you don't have good cell reception, let me know, and I have a couple of hard copies that I can share with you as well.
And there's also flyers on the A-frame that has the larger project map as well, if anyone wants a piece of paper to take with that's got the QR code for the project page as well.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to pass this around, and I'm going to see your talk real quick.
I'm Michael Papanek. I live right over there.
Hello, Caitlin Gillern with Marin Environmental, the consultant assisting Marin Wildfire.
Quinn Gardner.
Renee Voss, live over there.
Good morning, Jim Kagan, Superintendent for Environmental.
ecologically sound practices and the biomass provided.
Joe Aiello, San Rafael Fire.
Hi, I'm Marin.
Hi, Rebecca Sargis with the Marin Wildfire, Citizen Oversight Committee and Firewise Leader in Nevada.
Full system, neighborhoods over there. I'm Bruce Goins, MWPA Director, Nevada Fire Protection District Director, ESP, biomass, and I'm a licensed professional force.
Will Messinger, San Anselmo Public Works.
Mark Matsinden, San Anselmo Public Works.
Josh Hampshire, Marin Wildfire.
Mark Brown, Marin Wildfire.
Dennis Jones, moved to Marin just recently, own a home there, here, after living 27 years in England, where it rains all year long. Trying to find out what I can do to save my home.
You'll learn a few things.
It's fine. Thank you.
Kate Anderson, Santa Fe Fire.
I'm Del Cole with ESP and a number of other organizations.
And the biomass
So
project.
I think most of you are familiar with Marin Wildfire. We have another person from Marin County Parks. Hi, Michonne. I'm working for County Parks. So I'm not going to say too much about Marin Wildfire, except to say that we're here because of all of you. The voters of Marin voted to approve Measure C and fund wildfire mitigation at the county scale, at this scale where we can actually work cross-jurisdictionally. This project is maybe 145 acres, give or take, and is county, San Rafael, town of San Anselmo, Marin County Parks lands, private lands. It is a huge partnership to make something like this happen, and that's the whole focus of Marin Wildfire, is really thinking big, thinking in terms of systems. What can we do in terms of evacuations and alerts? What can we do in terms of vegetation management and working with our land management partners to think about stewarding this land more thoughtfully with wildfire in mind? What can we do in terms of home harming and defensive space inspections, and then helping residents do the work that's discovered during those inspections? Public education, we have a number of public education partners, including Fire Safe Marin, and I see the logo here. Thanks for joining. We're really tackling this with the big picture in mind, so that we can get big projects like this done. And one of the neighbors was just saying how this has been on their radar for a long time, a big concern for a long time, and they're really happy to see some work happen. And that's because it's been on Santa Fe's radar, on County Fire's radar for a long time, and now that we have funding through Measure C, we're able to get some work done. And Measure A, because Measure A is contributing as well to this project. So you guys, the voters, really put your money where your mouth is, and things are happening. So we're really excited about that. So I'm not going to say too much more about Marin Wildfire, except to acknowledge that there are a lot of fires happening around the state right now. I have friends who are poised to evacuate any moment right now, so it's on a lot of people's minds. And I think that this is how we continue making this corner of the world livable in a future with more severe wildfire. So, but Measure C expires in a few years, so we're going to be coming back to you, the voters, to think through how to continue this work in perpetuity, or at least in the long term, and keep this good work going and maintain. So with that, I'm going to ask Mark, is there anything else you want to add about Marin Wildfire French Authority or anything else?
I think you got it.
Yay.
I'm going to ask Belle to introduce herself. Many of you know Belle very well, but the environmental community is a very big partner of ours. That was part of the original language of our Joint Powers Authority, our Joint Powers Agreement, and so our partnership and our continued conversations and collaboration is very, very important to us.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership, a mouthful. So we call ourselves ESP, and so we're a collaborative between the fire community and environmentalists and climate specialists to work on risks of wildfires, dealing with it in a way that is sane and wise. And so we have produced a set of guidelines, a set of practices, best practices for ecologically sound practices for, and it has been adopted by the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Anyway, so we are a group, and one of the things we like about helping to support this absolutely wonderful field trip. These field trips are part of our makeup. We do this regularly, and it gives us a chance to see what it is we read about. You read about the plants, and you look at maps, and you hear people talk. But then you come out here, and you see kind of what a eucalyptus stand looks like, and you see what does it take to control it. You know, how do you deal with the large trees? How do you deal with the smaller trees? How do you handle it? And so the experts we have, you know, Kate and the others who tell us about it, just make it all come alive for us. So we're just delighted to be here and to be able to participate in these field trips, and we're going to keep doing it. So come to our meetings. Oh yes, let me just say we're having one on October 8th, and I'll send something out about it, but it's going to be on the on the Marin Biomass project, and a couple of us are going to make a presentation on kind of an outlook of where we are now. And then there'll be a great one in December, Julie, on Native Plant Society is putting one on. No, sorry, Marin
Master Gardeners.
Master Gardeners is putting one on
Defensible
climate
space
and gardening.
Defensible space and
And I think it's really going to be quite interesting. I looked at some of their data and some of their thoughts. So that's in December, and we're looking in November with Mark. So anyway, thanks a lot for giving me a chance to speak to you.
Thanks, Belle. One last word in terms of logistics. We're thinking that this will last about 2 hours. If you'd like to use the restroom, there's a porta potty right there next to the building. We're going to be walking in that direction, so you might want to look before we head out there, where there will not be bathrooms. But okay, that's it in terms of logistics that I'm aware of. And then I want to hand it off to Kate, who's going to be talking about this project. We're going to invite others to speak as well. But Kate.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate Anderson. I'm the Wildfire Prevention Program Manager at San Rafael Fire. As Anne mentioned, this is our 4th public tour. So I recognize a lot of faces. We have project partners here, a lot of people who wear multiple hats in this arena, from our board members to Firewise leaders, and to members of the public. And so I just want to do a quick scan of who is here for the first time joining us. So we have agency staff, we have members of the public. Who's been here for every tour? Just less than I thought. So there's new information every time we come out here. Kind of taking a quick look back. We've been planning this project since late 2020, working through kind of overall project design, working on building partnerships to make this happen in a collaborative manner that meets everybody's objectives, utilizing our tax dollars the most efficient way, and building a project that will become infrastructure to protect our communities, both San Rafael, Anselmo, and the greater region, hopefully into perpetuity with proper maintenance. So I just want to acknowledge everyone who's been here multiple times. We're going to hear a little bit of the same, which is the point that we're consistent in every area of this project. But today I really want to kind of focus on where we started. Our first field tour was, I think, before we even got the CEQA completed. So still in the planning phase, really want to open it up to show people what we're thinking about doing, what we think is feasible, how we want to do this project. We started at the top of that ridge and really looked down across the whole project. That was in August of 2023. We had another field trip in our pilot area that we'll look back on from a little vantage point of where we're going today, to kind of see, now we've got our planning done. We're ready to start. We're going to start small and really see what works, see how we want to proceed, and see what we can apply to the rest of the project. We were lucky enough to have a contractor that accommodated an in-progress field trip, and they were able to give us a demo while we were still in our pilot unit, which I hope was really eye-opening to kind of have people see, the beginning state, and then we usually just see the end state. And so really seeing how this work is done, how we're able to use equipment, who our contractors are, and kind of that in the middle phase I think is really important as we continue this kind of work. And now that we have our pilot project completed, our initial 10 acres, we are going to be walking north to see the next phase for this fiscal year. We've almost doubled the acreage, but a lot of the treatment methods are going to be the same or similar. And we'll talk about any nuances, lessons learned, and what we want to apply to the next phase and how we're going to continue to adapt our management. So that's a little bit of the background. And I think with that, we've been standing here a little while. If anybody has any other comments or questions before we get going. Yeah?
Yeah, just a comment.
Yeah.
Just that, where we're headed is eventually we're going to end up on the space property. And so I just wanted, I think personally these trips work best when we can make personal connections as we're walking around. There's definitely going to be time where we're all grouped up, we're all hearing and saying the same things, but I invite all of you to talk to myself, Noah, and Sean as we're going up there. If you have questions, you want to talk to us about the project that's coming up on our lands, then that'll help us formulate our thoughts for how we share that information and those good questions with the rest of the group once we get into the family.
I do.
Please ask.
Yeah, so as a resident of Ridgewood,
Yeah.
one of the things I'm curious about, besides all the treatment, all that stuff, is I assume big pieces of tree going in and out of here.
Excellent.
So maybe you're not ready to talk about that, or my wife and I assume, we're going to have maybe a very long period of time with big trucks taking big things in and out. Is it going to be up here or up there? And so at some point, that's something I'm curious about. Unless you can give me a short answer now, I know you want to get going.
Yeah. We will talk about it more as we get up there.
Okay. I can't stay the whole time, so if I peel off,
The,
take a break.
the short answer is we're not hauling logs.
Okay.
Everything that we're cutting right now in this phase is small enough to chip. So we've been chipping on site, or we'll be chipping and hauling. But right now, we are not hauling logs. We're not having log trips.
And do you know where egress will be for those trucks hauling the chips or whatever?
Yeah, we'll talk about access. Half the project is accessible from the bottom, from the cemetery, and then as we move up slope, we will moving on.
And you can see, Kate referenced the pilot project like up behind that building, but that hillside where you can see some of that has chip on it, some of it's already got grasses going through that, but the chips, leaving the chips on site and spreading them thin also helps us keep seasonal grasses and some other things down. So it's kind of a win-win, right? We're reducing traffic, the emissions associated with that, all that good stuff. One thing I wanted to just add was why this project site. And I think, I know a couple of the tours, Mark's talked about the fire history through this area, so by all means pick his brain on that. Bottom line, we have had multiple emissions in here, as well as some significant fires, right, just on that side of the ridge. I think we're pointing in the right direction, yes. And we know from our modeling and our data collection and some of the things we've been looking at with fire behavior modeling, LIDAR, our CWPP, etc., that the risk associated with this, if something gets going, especially if it gets up into the ridge and kind of the ability for it to ember cast even outside of this area, let alone directly impacting, of course, all the neighbors that live right out there. So that's why this particular project was so important from a risk reduction standpoint, as well as just an opportunity to really start restoring our lands. And certainly our friends at Marin County Parks can talk about that a lot more than I can, but right, eucalyptus are not native here. They took over everything that was native and natural here. So this is really an opportunity to try to put the landscape back in a place that's more sustainable for what Marin is and what this area is. And again, please ask them the questions as we walk through it. But I do just want to address why this site, right? Because there's tons of parcels all across the county that could be selected. And of course, there's proximity to folks matters too. So.
All right, now we're gonna start to stretch our legs. More logistics. I'll be in the front, guiding us through, but we do have signage with arrows to help direct you And then we do have a car, and I think you can see it, parked up at one of the top locations of our stop and talks. If you need a ride down, there is your ride. We're happy to do that. And if you need a ride up, I don't think we had thought about that, but if you
We're stopping a lot.
okay, we'll be taking lots of breaks.
And if you really need a ride out, we can
All right. Well, we're gonna do something about it. So this is our first unit that will be starting hopefully as early as next week. Yay. This summer, and actually this is why we wanted to start earlier in the year in the pilot area, is knowing that summer is coming, knowing that the contractors that we use who can do this kind of work in the most efficient and safe way are also impacted by fire season. A lot of them are contractors for fire recovery, for pre-fire work, for emergency work, and they are stressed during the summer. So we've had to adjust kind of around their capacity and their schedules, and thus we have a delayed project. I was hoping to have some work in progress by today to show you all, but we'll just nitpick it instead. So we'll be starting we're calling this Unit 6, and how we have it broken up are the cemetery lands have a few different units, and that's because we have to move the equipment from unit to unit because of our water courses, any areas that equipment can't get through, and to protect biological resources. So moving into here, if you were at the demonstration for the pilot project, you might have noticed that we do have tracked equipment of a smaller size, but into the units. So this is one of those units where we've had a geologist come out, we've walked every foot of this project area, and we concluded that because of the slope and the stability and the shape of the slope, that we're able to bring equipment into the unit. We're looking at a similar prescription or kind of the scope of what is going to be cut as the other units. That's one thing we're bringing right over. So we'll be looking at removing eucalyptus under 10 inches. There's that wiggle room of that 11 to 15 diameter range where we'll be selectively choosing trees to remove. And because equipment can't get into the unit safely, we'll be chipping a little bit further into the unit. So that allows us to get a more even spread. We'll have less potential for buildup or having to rake things out. And you also might notice that there's a lot of this laid out, and we'll be adapting as we move into other units as well. Are there any questions about? Yes. The same way that we applied it at the other units and that we've been talking about throughout this planning process. So this is called a thin line application. It's a direct application to the basal bark of the broom plants. So very direct. It is not aerosolized. We are not foliar or spraying. It's a direct application localized to the plant, and it's become very effective the times that we do it.
How do you do that? There's different mechanisms. Is there a device you use, or?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. There can be a sponge applicator or a wand applicator, and with the wand applicator, we'll mix the solution with a little oil to make it heavier so it doesn't aerosolize, and it's a very direct application. Yeah.
So, as somebody who's looking at the stands of, what do you regard as high canopy, or medium canopy, and low? The things you'll be taking out, things you won't be taking out.
Yeah, so any trees that we are retaining at this point, we'll want to make sure that we still have that canopy clearance. So removing the ladder fuels Bell step 1 is to remove the broom that's under. That's kind of the easy way. Step 2 is making sure that we have that canopy clearance. So eucalyptus, we can see, sheds a lot of bark. It's stringy, it falls down, it's really flammable, really high surface area, perfect ladder fuel. So we're removing that as well. And if there's still limbs that are coming down kind of below that 6 to 10 feet, that's the minimum that we want to cut it to. So we will be doing some pruning if it's necessary with retention trees.
I have not gotten to read the guidelines yet, but you mentioned the 10 inches and 11 to 15 was the beginning phase, or just?
Yeah, so I do want to be crystal clear that there is no real diameter limit as described in our CEQA. But what we want to do, because of fiscal constraints and everything else, and just impact to the land, amongst many other factors, to get an impact that we want initially, to stretch our dollars the most, we're focusing on the understory fuels and those 10 inches. There are a ton of them. I think in our CEQA, in our CalVTP PSA, we have it listed out how many under 10 inch trees there are, and there's thousands. It's a really good place to start. Yes.
You might have already covered this. Are you going to go all the way up to the fire road?
We are, and I will invite Marin County Parks to talk about kind of how we're transitioning from the cemetery lands onto Marin County Parks lands. Also just, really realizing we can't determine where a boundary is just looking at it. They're invisible, they're on the ground, and it is the same conditions from here all the way to the top of the ridge. And so we've been working together to treat it as a whole unit.
Hi, Kate. Looking around on both sides of the road, I see that we have star thistle.
Yes.
Pervasive here. I don't see much, but there's a little bit. How does star thistle is an invasive weed, it's a non-native, and it spreads and it's nasty and it's hard to get rid of once it gets in. So what are your considerations for invasive species control within the project?
Yeah, so broom, as you can see, we are treating with herbicide. Some of the star thistle that is mixed into the broom has also been treated, but we do have patches of star thistle that Jacob I will have speak about. We have mapped them, and we're working with county parks to kind of mesh those maps of where star thistle is on the project. And Jacob, if you want to talk a little bit about the data collection and how it's going to be used, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. So we did a couple of things. First of all, we went through and did a systematic photo point monitoring of the site so we can capture before conditions. And so on points across the site, we took photos and we also recorded whether yellow star thistle was present in that area or not. So that's one sort of like systematic way we can track across the site. The other thing is that myself and my colleague Ted over there went around and we cruised the area and we looked and mapped out on ArcGIS or a GIS platform where star thistle is, and that we can share that with project partners. Marin County Parks also has their own map of yellow star thistle, so by using both of those tools we can have a pretty good sense of where yellow star thistle is, or at least or where it's most dominant, and those are the areas that we can make sure that we're being super strict about sanitizing equipment, those sorts of things, doing our environmental compliance protocols to make sure that we aren't spreading those seeds around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doing it for Marin County Parks Fund, so you guys deal with yellow star thistle and non-native invasive management at times. It's a big topic.
Yeah, it is important. I mean, I think Jacob, great.
Oh, just talking about star thistle.
Right? We're all working together to remove this information, to remove this food. Joe, you've been out here hiking and mapping with Julianne.
Yeah, I mean, in 2019, we conducted yellow star thistle surveys for all of Terra Linda Preserve. we get further up the slope, you know, onto open space property, unfortunately, a lot of the grassland in this area is invaded by other things, particularly above this area. We've got a different related thistle, actually bachelor button is a ornamental that's kind of already invaded up north there. And yeah, it's kind of just a, you know, as we see this weed, if it is spreading, we've got different parameters for how we decide to manage it, you know, areas that are of higher concern than others, and just a range of different treatment methods, all the way from, you know, hand pulling, you know, grazing, prescribed fire, and herbicide. Yeah.
That was a question.
I raised a concern with Anne recently about the implementation of the project over there, and found a, you know, there's a good explanation for why this black oak was cut. But you know, one of the concerns I have is that some of the native understory trees that I think the intent is to retain those, were being cut. And I'm talking about Toyon and Bay, and you know, perhaps some other species. There's probably some oaks scattered throughout here. And one of the things I suggested was that maybe we should mark the trees that should be retained, rather than, you know, put it up to the operator to make those decisions on what should be retained or not. I mean, is that something that could be done? Feasible? I mean, there aren't that many. I mean, there are quite a few, but, you know, compared to the eucalyptus, there's a lot fewer native trees, and those trees, you know, we obviously want those trees, right?
Yeah, I'll start us off, and then Kate, I'll ask you to finish. Yeah, so the purpose of this project is really to thin out eucalyptus trees, small diameter eucalyptus trees, hazardous trees. So mostly we're retaining the native vegetation. We want the native vegetation. Jim was using a term passive restoration the other day to describe this work. We'd love to see a native species thrive in this area. With that black oak in particular, it had 3 stems, 2 were retained, 1 was removed. So the tree remains, but one of the stems was removed because it was going to block the chipper vehicle, and therefore would block emergency vehicles trying to move from this area during an incident. And then with that, you know, some native vegetation has been thinned here and there, like bay, a little bit, but mostly we want that native vegetation to stay. We want to remove small diameter eucalyptus, especially so that the native vegetation can thrive. But do you want to address that in particular?
Yeah, and so I think, you know, I just want to take a look out at this landscape and kind of notice how dense things are and how kind of choked up they are. And so in removing trees, you know, with our contractors, our training is always to retain native trees at all costs. Oaks we do not touch. Oaks are the ones that we retain the most strictly. In the case of the road impacts, that's where we have a case-by-case removal. But in removing and getting these larger eucalyptus down onto the ground, sometimes we do require the removal of a few, in most cases it's bays, because they grow really similarly. We can't remove all the eucalyptus without removing any of the native vegetation that might be blocking the felling path. So in certain cases, we will need to remove a negligible amount of native vegetation in order to fell the target tree. With constraints, you know, we're not cutting oaks. Oaks will remain. Buckeye will remain. But bay, just like eucalyptus, also sprouts. And a lot of what we're seeing are the result of kind of these multiple sprouts coming up after these historical fires. They're designed and evolved to do that. So they will be coming back. The roots remain and remain alive. We're not treating any of the bays with herbicide, but we are removing a few select stems to get access to the target trees. So, any desire?
Yeah, just add.
We don't
Renee's
want to cut
specific.
natives unless we have to.
Sorry, Kate.
Oh.
Well, no, just you had specific suggestions just about, and I think it comes down to the communication and how we're working with the contractor. Yes, the tailgate's an important part and the conversations part, and I think it's certainly feasible to be able to flag key species too, so there's no question for the operator about what's what, and not leaving it up to them. When we're working on open space land, Noah and Luke, our biodiversity coordinators, will be on site managing that. We want to support the entire project, so I think it depends on the circumstance, but we certainly flag native vegetations and exclusion areas all the time to make it crystal clear for the operator.
Yeah, I think on the inverse of that, we're already flagging trees kind of in that borderline criteria for the contractor to see and remove, and so we can very easily go in and do the same for the non-negotiable retention trees as well. Any other questions before we keep
Have you done any on-site burning, on-site treatment of what comes down, the debris, the stuff that you cut down? On-site, like pile burning, or spreading, or I mean, whatever you do you have a practice there?
Yeah, so we're still using the same biomass disposal method as the beginning part of the project. Right now it's all chip and broadcast or chip and haul. We have it written into our CEQA document that we have the option to pile burn. We just haven't had the unit where we want to implement that, or the resources available. The TAMP crew would be the most natural fit, and they've been gone a lot. So kind of getting them down in the right weather window when all the crew is here and all the factors align. We have not ventured into that yet, but it's on the table.
Have you actually removed any of the biomass that's chipped, or is it
All of it's been chipped on site.
Okay.
We haven't removed anything off of the site.
The chips either, the chips stay
Yep.
here.
So it's a fuel modification in its truest sense.
You know, if you did remove some, do you know where they go?
Yes. So the cemetery has asked for some. So anything, if we get to the point where we cannot keep a chip depth under 4 inches, as required by our CEQA document, the cemetery would like some. So we already have avenues to essentially still keep it on site for them to use in whatever way that they want to, but like to keep the discussion open for anybody else who would like chips.
Offsite for cogeneration, for electricity, things like that.
Yeah, I think if the option presents itself, we haven't ventured into that ourselves. But if there's
There's no concrete plan to do that.
there is no concrete plan to do that.
There is, and Bell's our leader, but there is a project that's funded by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. It started about three and a half years ago to take a look at all the green waste that are generated in Marin where it currently goes, and to take a look at pathway options that would maybe optimize the environmental benefit, the greenhouse gas benefit. And so there are opportunities identified. It's a 6-chapter study. We're into number 5, which is now some recommendations. And this document will identify what some options are and who the parties are that control those decisions, to give them the data and information, the economics, the pro forma, the information that they need to make a decision. Because as it is right now, there is no bioenergy cost of bioenergy facility. If you are effectively two, and there's quite a bit of compost. It's a partnership with the agricultural community also, who is interested in possibly receiving some of this material, have it cast out on their landscape, increase productivity and growth and carbon retention. So there's a study going on, and you're welcome to join our conversation if you'd like to.
We're going to make a presentation on this on the 8th of October.
Yeah, I've got it on my calendar. Thank you.
Good, good. I'm glad you're coming.
I have to peel off. As a resident, I have to take 1 second to interrupt and thank this amazing group of people here. And it's just so important, and you're doing it, you're so professional. the volunteers as well as the people on the job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really,
For coming,
can't
Michael.
say how much we appreciate the care and everything. So I got to go back to work.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Yes.
Hey, I asked Kate if I could interrupt real quick because we're all looking this way at the project, and we're seeing what Marin Wildfire, San Rafael Fire, and our partners are doing. But I want to turn around and I want to look at that slope over there. And I want you to see all the amazing D space that the residents have banded together to create on that hill.
I have to agree. So my farmer's site is the other side of that hill.
Yeah.
We're doing okay. So that's San Rafael, and the other side is San Anselmo. And we've always been very worried about the area down below that, particularly the Seneca. But the shaded fuel break has done a lot of good work down below. So very, very happy about it.
Yeah, so when I looked, when I drive around Marin and I see the residents doing that much shaded or defensible space around their homes, it's like, this is how we're going to get through this. It's the residents doing their part, and then the public entities doing their part in cooperation with a lot of private contractors as well. Thanks, Kate.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Really good. I think just pointing out the integration of how we want this to all fit together. Also why I invite our defensible space inspectors to these projects to, one, see kind of how their work, hopefully the result of their work, once it's implemented, and how it all works together with all the initiatives in the project that we're doing. With that, I think we're off to the next point. I think everybody can hear me. I wanted to stop here to look back at the pilot project. I think from here we can really see kind of the intent of opening up the canopy, opening up that understory, removing a lot of the material, and just kind of acknowledging that that looked like this before we started. And if you can't see it, feel free to move up a little bit. Does anybody notice anything over at the pilot project that maybe wasn't there a few months ago? Anything bright and green?
Bunch of broom.
Yeah. So what we are seeing in the pilot area, and this really comes back to the idea of adaptive management, of trying out methods, working within the framework of our CEQA documentation, figuring out what works on a local level for a local project. And so what we've found that I'd like Jacob to speak to a little bit more is the effectiveness of some of our herbicide application and kind of how we want to apply different methods moving forward into the next couple of units. So I'll invite Jacob to say a few words about what we're planning to do.
Yeah, so all of those bright green sprouts you see over there are from when the eucalyptus stump was cut, and then it re-sprouted from the same root base. And it becomes very shrubby, very oily, very flammable. It's one of the reasons that we use, or the primary reason that we use herbicide when we're cutting these eucalyptus, because they aggressively re-sprout, which defeats the point of trying to thin out that eucalyptus, and it's also a fire hazard in its own right. One of the major things that Kate mentioned was like, this is the pilot area. This is where we kind of, and this is pretty standard for large projects, the relationship between the site, the contractor, the treatment methods, the species that you're working in, all have sort of unique interactions with each other. And so it's standard to kind of have an area where you can kind of work through things, work through those challenges, and figure out something that you can, a good system that you can apply to the broader landscape. So that's what we're doing with this pilot area, looking at the different ways that herbicide was applied after the stump was cut to figure out which is the most effective. And as we do that, studying, we can figure out, okay, now we have this data, we know it is the most efficient way we can apply this herbicide for the best bang for our buck. Now we can take what we learned from that and try it in a different unit, and if we can replicate those results of, yes, this is a more efficient and more effective application of herbicide that gives us the best bang for our buck, that makes sure that we're using our taxpayer dollars most effectively, then we can apply that to the broader landscape. So the sequencing of how that's done and how we're applying that herbicide is, or the timing of how we apply that herbicide is something that we're working with our partners at UC Cooperative Extension, and we'll be doing the sort of preliminary data collection on that in the next week or so.
Yeah. Do you want to highlight that a little bit more?
Yeah, so we are working with UC Cooperative Extension, the University of California Cooperative Extension, on a study. We're working with a forester, Troy Norville, to sort of, in the different areas where we've applied different sequencing of herbicide, we'll collect both how frequently the resprouting has occurred and how that relates to the stump diameter. And based on the data that we get from that, we can then sort of change the order in which we apply herbicide to a different unit. And if we can prove that it's a more effective, a more efficient application, then we can apply that to the broader project.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, go ahead.
Did you try different methods over there? Some work better than others?
Excellent question. And then I want to go back to UC Extension. Yeah. We used two different methods. When we started the project, it was raining intermittently. So kind of the weather windows for herbicide applications weren't there. We can't apply when it's wet, when it's going to rain. So we opted to cut and leave the stumps high with the intent to come back after it started getting sprouts, to cut and retreat immediately. As we moved around the corner, getting into that later springtime, we had less rainfall, we had more weather windows to apply herbicide. It's a very strict prescription. We can only do it at certain times of day with different humidities and temperature. It's very, very specific. So once that opened up, we decided to try to apply as we went. And that is where we're getting the mixed results and the effectiveness. And so we're going to try a few different methods, kind of see what works. Yeah, Julie.
Based on the data, if we need specificity on the application of the herbicide, does that require any kind of amendments to the CEQA documents?
Yep. So the CEQA documents call out kind of the parameters in kind of when we can apply, how we apply, but kind of fine tuning for this project is not something that we need to amend.
Another question.
Yeah.
Did you actually go up into the canopy and thin horizontally, or it doesn't look like that to me? I was just
No.
curious.
So you'll notice that eucalyptus, some of them have branches that come down, but we didn't go past that 6 to 10 feet. We went as far as a pole saw could reach.
So limbing up, basically.
Yeah, but we weren't climbing trees, kind of thinning out the canopy in the canopy.
Yeah.
But I do want to highlight our partnership with UC Extension just a little bit more. They are a fantastic resource. They're an advisor to any agency, private landowner, pretty much anyone who wants them to advise. Specifically, Tori is our fire advisor. She's a registered professional forester. She's worked in public land management, private land management. She knows what she's doing. And so being able to take her out here to kind of see the issue that I saw with our post-treatment, and her volunteering to help us design a study that's specific to this project, and for her to kind of run the management and the stats behind that, we're super lucky to have, and to build that relationship and to build in really localized science to our projects. We base a lot of our project design on studies and research that isn't typically located in Marin. And so being able to do these localized studies I think it's super awesome, and will help guide as we do more eucalyptus management within the county and San Rafael.
It's sort of unique, isn't it?
It's unique. Yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah. I mean, there's this particular study they're doing for you is something that has come up. It's not, they're not based on a lot of other studies they've done.
Yeah, so localized data you get to apply locally and hopefully we have.
I mean, nationally too, I probably.
Well, yeah.
Great.
Question?
Yeah.
On that slope, that's covered with chips, is it?
Yes.
I probably know the answer. Why do you use the chips there? Why do you put chips on the slope?
One, I mentioned we started this work in kind of early to mid-spring. We had a lot of intermittent rainfall. And so leaving material on site kind of below that 4-inch maximum, and that's for fire protection. Leaving it on site, we found kept everything really stable. So as we got rain, you know, we have equipment on site, we have people walking around, we have trees falling. Inevitably there's going to be minimal ground disturbance, but being able to keep chips on site stabilizes it. And what we found after multiple days of rain, we had zero transfer of those chips down the road, so it keeps everything really stable. The other reason is it's expensive to haul off site. So to keep costs down where we can, we're going to keep chips on site.
You think about as a mulch, is it, you know,
yeah, and it also acts as a mulch.
To heat off the soil and
yeah,
things like
so
that,
it keeps the soil moisture content higher. That's good as we're going into summer. We still have some grasses that are able to come up. The poison oak is very prolific, but we're also hoping that there is an impact on, you know, whether it's broom or other species coming up that we don't want. But to be seen and how that works. Any other questions about kind of how the pilot has resulted or faring? We'll move on. It's getting a little hot in the sun for me. The only other thing I wanted to point out here, we can't really see them, so maybe not the best vantage point, is that we will be bringing equipment off-road and into the units, but we do have a lot of kind of old access routes that we can use that are pre-existing, and that's really what we want to try to use as much as we can, is existing infrastructure. I didn't realize we really couldn't see it from here, but trust me, they're there. So when we can use existing road beds, they might be a little overgrown, but they're there. The structure's there, and they can maintain our equipment. We will be using those to keep soil disturbance low and to keep equipment off the slopes as much as we can. So just want to point that out.
So you have started in here?
We have not started yet.
Yeah. And so this road here that we see below, is that one of the roads you're going to use?
Yeah, there's one. I thought we could see it from here, but we can't. Okay. But there is an existing access route that goes through there.
Reduction projects, all of them is one. You know, we're really excited about. We've been working with PAPE and MWPA for the last couple of years to really put together a plan that I think achieves some of those multiple benefits. Obviously, we have neighbors in the area where fire is a real concern, and that's a shared concern of ours. We also have a monoculture out here of eucalyptus primarily, with broom. You notice you know you're on open space because we just walked through a gate, but if that wasn't there, it's more of the same, right? So these multiple projects, the collaboration across land jurisdictions and agencies is really key for developing a meaningful project like this one. I just want to say a couple things about our approach to this, and it's that we kind of do very similar work that you've seen through the pilot project. And although the pilot was not on Marin County open space lands, we collaborated with all the partners to kind of understand the techniques and talk about refining that and learning lessons from that first phase, so that when we come up onto the district lands, we'd be really dialed into what we want to do. One of the things that makes this work really successful is the funding, right? I mean, Ann in the beginning mentioned Measure C, and that's been critical for operating across jurisdictions. All the work on the cemetery and with the city of Anselmo, none of that work would be possible without it. We have our own Measure A. Measure A is a quarter-cent sales tax in Marin that was first adopted in 2012, I believe, 2011, and until 2022, and then a couple years ago, Measure A 2.0 was re-approved by the voters, and in this new version, there's a 25% set aside for biofuel reduction in itself. And so, you know, that's an expression of the voters' interest in stressing the importance of this type of work. And it was also a signal to us to be able to leverage our own money against Measure C. So that's another part of our partnership, is making sure that when we identify these multiple jurisdiction projects, that we can lean into it financially, we can lean into it with our staff and our expertise. And so, you know, some of the conversations that we've been having lately, moving past the funding conversations, just like, well, what are we going to do on our land? What is this going to look like? You know, in the prescription that we're focusing on eucalyptus that are 10 inches and under, with select eucalyptus between 11 and 15 inches, that achieves our objective. We want to start eradicating this species. This landscape used to be more of an oak grassland, and, you know, the diversity and the biodiversity that comes along with a landscape like that is much different than what we have now, and that's part of our mission, is to try to promote biodiversity. So that's a step in the right direction for us, just this initial phase of smaller eucalyptus removals. We also want to take care of all the broom and the other invasive species we've already talked about all the way throughout the day. But we also had a lot of conversations just about our biological presence and like the different species that are out here. So, you know, an additional component that we'll be adding is just looking at our bat habitat. You know, typically there's not a lot of great guidance around that, but our team has developed these protocols where for trees over 10 inches, there's a multiple step process in order to sort of disturb the tree, check for the presence of bats, and then monitor that. And depending on the findings, then you remove it or you don't remove it, and you wait and see. So, you know, that is something that we want to make sure that we're protecting, and that's another piece of what Noah and Luke will be doing out here daily in partnership with Sequoia Environmental Consulting, who's been a key partner on all the MWPA projects to help with those surveys. So that's all I really wanted to add today, and just make sure that you all knew who we are and that you felt comfortable reaching out to us when questions come up, or if there was any questions about this phase of the field trip that you wanted to have us address publicly today.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing, Jim. Mark and I were just talking about this. Back when Mark was working at the Marin County Fire Department, we partnered with the fire department, the Marin County Fire Department, for years at the top part. So you'll notice as we walk up how thick and dense it is here, that it does thin up there, because we've been really putting for years. But we didn't have the funding until Measure A and Measure C in this new partnership. So yeah, I just want to say it's been a really good experience and a big learning experience of how much it costs to actually do something like this, and just the capacity and the lift it is to do this. So really appreciate the work that we're doing now. We're able to take a bigger swing at it.
A lot of conversation.
Yes.
Get to this point.
But I think a couple of just things just about our role, you know, just with activities happening on our lands, we just want to try to be having a daily presence, participating in those tailgates. Renee was asking questions about how we communicate sensitive resources with our contractors, and just kind of monitoring, you know, throughout the project.
And then I wanted to highlight kind of what the ideal state of most of this is already on the rig. And there's multiple years of kind of initial treatment and maintenance and moving on the hill. That's what we're trying to do with the rest of this. So I think it is your first time, I think we only have one maybe. If you make it up to the top of the rig, not today, don't want to. But the top of this rig, along with the fire road, is a great demonstration of how we can retain the larger trees. We don't have to do a complete eradication of blue gum eucalyptus. There are a lot of sentimental value to these trees. They've been here a long time. But we can still achieve our fire mitigation goals with an open, well-spaced canopy. So I think kind of just the time and getting people back. Oh.
Just a quick question there. Is there one CEQA document handling all of this landscape?
Yes.
across the agencies.
Yeah.
And then the operator, there's one operator, same operator?
Correct.
Okay, good, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do, you know, the more that we can use one contractor, I think better, consistent product over the project.
Yeah, no, and that was a great softball, Bruce, because I think you're highlighting a few things. Thank you for asking. No, there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of work around that specific issue, you know, making sure that we all are covered and we're all relying on the same regulations and committing to the different PSAs that are in this document, this master document, working and collaborating at our financial and administrative levels to be able to use a single vendor so that there isn't communication issues between different people doing different things and getting different messages. So it's taken a lot of work to be able to use, well, MWPA really has set the stage to open those kinds of partnerships, and we've used our MOUs with MWPA and other fire agencies to really do creative strategies like this, use a single vendor across, you know, 3-4 different landowners. So thanks for the question, and yeah, it sounds like a simple thing, but when you're dealing with local government, it kind of isn't sometimes, so we're thankful to have the partnership.
Congratulations.
How about the follow-up, and then how about the tracking of it, and after it's done? Is the same kind of collaboration goes on and tracking what happened and evaluating their success?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into, there's weekly discussions about the progress. That's all data is collected and entered, it's reported on as part of the Calvin PP, right? There's reporting requirements. So there's all the data collection piece that I think you're asking about, but then there's also just what do we do next, and what does maintenance look like in this area? So there's photo points, and there's monitoring, and there's you know, other things that we'll do to watch, you know, as we're watching the landscape evolve. And we're going to have to change our strategies as we go, but every landscape is a little bit different. I think we know what to anticipate when we're removing eucalyptus in a place where there's a history of bloom, is that we're going to see bloom coming up, and we're hopefully going to see some of the native species that are left here thriving. But there are things that we don't know, and so that's where the photo points and kind of continuing to be out here on an annual basis at a minimum, and checking and seeing what's happening, what's changing, is going to be our strategy for a long time.
But I think also like building in a budget for it. We know bloom's coming back. We know eucalyptus, neighborhood stress. We know, you know, every stump painting might not be 100% effective. And building that into the longevity of this project is crucial.
And that's a great point. I mean, all of the work that we're doing on the landscape, we're considering permanent projects that we need to go back and maintain in perpetuity, or as long as Measure C lasts. So Measure C expires in 2030, and so we're going to be asking the voters to help us maintain all of these projects that we're working on today. And then in terms of monitoring, this project is getting a lot of specialized attention because this is a really unique project for us. Most of our shaded tool breaks and work on the landscape really retains canopies. We really like to retain trees, especially native trees, and work on the understory. We have so much flammable, non-native understory that there's a lot to do there, a lot of limbing up to do, things like that. This is very unique because we're removing a lot of small diameter eucalyptus trees. And so a lot of special attention is paid to collecting data for this project in particular. But in general, we've been developing our monitoring program and data collection program, and working with all of our 17-member agencies to do standardized data collection on these projects at that scale, so we can really dig into what's happening where, and then look at that long term. It's been a work in progress, but we've made a lot of progress towards all that kind of standardized, thorough data collection.
As far as data collection and monitoring goes, is there a plan for long-term monitoring of wildlife abundance and diversity? Is there a baseline of wildlife abundance and diversity to begin with, and how long do they monitor? I mean, it's going to change. You can solve from the other side. It's going to change the habitat. You know, we want to know what the effect is on the wildlife. So is that data there? Is the data going to be collected?
One thing we've started in this project is annual acoustic monitoring for birdsong. And so before the project was implemented, we had reporters out there reporting birdsong so we could tell what was there beforehand. So we'll go back at the same time of year more to say on that?
What about abundance?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I don't know, Sean, do you want to talk about the wildlife team at all and just like what their work looks like?
Yeah, I mean, we have baseline information across all of our preserves, so yeah, the short answer is yes. And whether we're doing abundance specifically at preserves, we're just not there yet, but we do have baseline.
Anything else? We'll be baking in the sun?
You're always in the sunny side. Yeah.
I know. I think with that, we'll conclude the formal tour. I'll probably head back, but anybody is welcome to continue their hike or walk back with us. Really want to thank you all for coming out, for these repeated visits to the site as we see it change, as we see it evolve. Really appreciate all of your continued interest and investment in the project.